All right. Let's jump immediately to reviewing outstanding RFCs. Share my screen. Hold on just a second. All right. So let's see. Up first, add initial version of our, if I vaguely remember, I was supposed to merge this at the, oh no, Dan still hasn't approved it. So does anyone know what the state of this is in then?
I mean, without Dan's feedback, I wouldn't know. I was under the impression that this was good to go.
That's what I thought too. Maybe Dan will look at it. I will ping him outside of this meeting. There's a Java one. I will skip over that considering Dan's not here today. Next up is this Go Bomb RFC. I think this one's good to go. I think the one change we did want to see was to have this get moved under, oh, it is, okay. It's under the Go. Okay, I don't see why this couldn't get merged.
I approved it. I was waiting for more comments from people that had actual feedback on the initial RFC process. I'm more than happy to merge it though, because it seems fine.
Maybe Frankie is the only one here with outstanding requested changes. Maybe we ping Frankie and say, please take a look.
Sure, sounds good to me. I can go bump Frankie at some point today.
Sounds good. This RFC to auto-generate reference documentation.
Yeah, so Victoria and I haven't really done anything extra on this. Sophie down here in this sort of long thread asked that a POC might be nice. And so a POC is something that I'm working on this week or today. I'm kind of trying to do battle right now with the sort of Go README parser and then the AST that it builds and all sorts of fun stuff like that. So I've been working on that, but
cool.
Yeah.
All right. So this is just in hold mode until we have some more information. Sounds good. This one, proposal to use code owner's file to delegate responsibility for documentation PR approvals. This is new this week.
Yeah, this can honestly totally be merged. I really just wanted it brought up at a working group meeting in front of other maintainers. I'm gonna hold off like an hour or so, or I can give you all the rundown of it really quickly. It's basically on the Paketo website. There's a series of documents like the how-tos, the reference docs that are very much language specific. So, you know, Java docs and .NET docs and whatever. And so Dan basically came in and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we change the code owner's file such that, and he has a whole layout of it, such that we just made it so those individual maintainer groups can open PRs and merge them through approvals. And it's not really on the content maintainers to have to merge like these sort of Java whatever changes or the .NET whatever changes. And I was like, I like that a lot. If you could open up an RFC, that sounds like something that would be super cool. So this is that RFC.
Cool. As another content maintainer, I do think you should wait till there's a quorum of actual maintainer approval, but this seems totally reasonable.
I figured. Actually, that's a quick question that I have. When we're doing these, we do quorums for the RFC approvals, yeah?
I've always assumed that it was like up to the teams to decide, but I think most of the teams were doing like a quorum vote.
Could I ask a crazy question? Like, it feels like if we're trying to say, hey, certain folks are able to merge PRs for documentation, basically because, or that makes me feel like we're kind of saying that content and having like uniform formatting trumps the language and the experts of people who might maintain it. And I wonder if it, like, is there a world where the site really just says, here is the format for acceptable documentation, and this documentation lives on the repos that maintainers are already able to merge for? And obviously that may mean there's more work required to like pull from the different repos to then like compile and render the documentation, but it just feels a little bit, I guess, weird to start putting process in because of a location. It feels like where these documentation like files live.
I am not entirely 100% sure that I follow all of that logic, so I might feel free to stop you if I'm mischaracterizing, but I think that I don't know that there is, in my head, a fundamental enough difference between this document, like a long-standing document, right? Like a how-to where you're sort of writing like, this is what you do for this process, and you know when you have to go in and change it for a given process. I don't know why that being located in the website, at least for right now, is any different. I think that there could be an argument made where we have tried extracting these things more locally in the past and run into issues sort of based in the implementation realm. So for now, I think that this gets us kind of the best of the both worlds, where the subject matter experts are able to edit documents with no input from, or no blocking from, higher level content maintainers, while still having these things centralized inside, inside the website.
I hear you. I'm not necessarily opposed. It just feels like now we're kind of getting into a world of like multiple different types of maintainers for one repo.
So this is already the case for a couple of other content like repositories, and I put content in quotes because it's kind of, content has become a bit of a like things that we collect and for the use of promoting and potentially sort of demoing Paketo. So like the samples repository is a really great example of this, because I think the samples repository has a pretty similar layout where each sort of folder that has the various samples has these sort of code owner slots, so that there's not, and then even this RFC repo has the same thing. Like content team maintainer is the only person that has to approve this RFC in order to get merged because of the code owner setup for this.
It makes sense.
One thing that Elliot said that I kind of agree with is like, will our docs kind of like risk kind of being out of alignment if we don't have that extra layer of like the content maintainers who are aware of like the structure and the way we write our sentences and things like that, like prose used, like not having that extra layer, somebody checking that everything is nice and like coherent and cohesive with the website. Could that be a problem? Like obviously like the node maintainers like could go and like check that things look good, but do the content maintainers not care that like the website might like be a little bit, or like the docs might be like a little bit like all over the place if they're not also checking? Because that probably is like as a maintainer of like a build pack, my first thing that I'd be checking for would just be like that the content is right, probably not that like everything is cohesive.
To me, I feel like this straddles the line a little bit in terms of responsibilities. I don't think the current situation is that like the content maintainers have to like approve every single thing that goes into this repo. And that creates a bottleneck. I think that this maybe is a good trade-off in that like there's only so much damage, I guess, you could possibly do to the cohesiveness of the like content, given you only have access to stuff you're a maintainer of. I also think that most of the folks who are maintainers should try to think about what is just like an addition of extra content that already conforms to the way we're already writing our documentation versus like, I've redesigned the whole how-to section. And when that happens, like maybe pull in content maintainers to say, this is like a much more structural change and we should maybe get some feedback from the folks who are thinking about that kind of stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's what I had in mind. Like I just put a PR in for redoing the how-to section of Ruby. And I would, like a lot of the content is the same, but like it just completely restructured. And I wouldn't expect like a Ruby maintainer to go in and check that. I would expect like the people on the website maintainer team to, or the content maintainer team to be dealing with that. But I guess it's like a case-by-case basis. So that works for me.
Cool. Anything left to say here? All right, next up, proposal to have a standard interface for enabling remote debugging. Dan, you're here now, so maybe you can speak to this one.
Sure. Yeah, this came up in a conversation yesterday. So the Java team has remote debugging enabled in the JVM, and I heard that some of the other language families are looking to do similar things with remote debugging. And it just kind of seemed like we should probably try to standardize on like the interface for that. Obviously, the implementation is going to differ from language family to language family, but you know, how a user would turn on debugging and turn off debugging, it seems like it'd be nice to have it all kind of cohesive. So that's kind of what this is attempting to do.
There's only one question I had about this. I think the general thrust of it makes a lot of sense. I'm confused about the BPL underscore prefix versus the BP prefix, and in what cases you use which. That is like, seems like implicit knowledge that is not articulated here.
I mean, so like BP is our standard for build time flags, and BPL is our standard for runtime or launch time flags. So the idea would be, the difference here would really be, does your language runtime need additional stuff installed to do debug? In the case of Java, it doesn't. It's all just part of the JVM. So we only use the BPL debug enabled. But you know, I suppose you might need additional packages or, you know, or something, you know, so that was kind of an attempt to just be more accommodating, I guess, to, you know, potential needs of other language families. If it's not something that we need, we could cut that for sure.
I guess I'm trying to understand what is the use case of having a build time debug flag. Like, are you debugging while the build is taking place?
No, so most of the time, so like for Java, we install the JVM, it goes into the image, it's available at runtime. So there's a helper that what we call a helper, it's an execd that will essentially turn debug on or off. So if you set BPL debug enabled to true, then debug gets turned on. If you set it to false, which is the default, it gets turned off. If you had to install additional tools or libraries to do remote debugging, that would mean you'd have a potentially larger image. And so you might want to be able to disable that at build time so that those extra things don't get stuffed into the image.
I see what you're saying. Interesting. yeah, I guess I'm like wondering about this BPL prefix because I don't feel like it is something we've included commonly across any of our build packs up to this point. It feels like a new convention that, well, maybe was like followed on the Java side, is definitely not followed anywhere else in Paketo.
Okay. It could be. That was like
I hear you, but like also we probably have a whole bunch of other flags that already do this type of thing, but don't follow the convention.
Gotcha.
So
That
then
was
do we go
something, yeah,
back and like add the prefix?
that's hard. That's a convention that was before me, and I made some assumptions there that it was something that was agreed upon, because I know there was an RFC about the use of environment variables for configuration. I had probably should have reread that again to make sure this was in that. But yeah, that's trickier. I'm not sure I have a good answer off the top of my head.
All right. Maybe I go back and read that one as well, just to make sure I'm not misremembering that. I don't feel like this was covered. This BPL convention was covered, but I could totally be wrong about that. Okay. Yeah, that's my only concern. Like generally speaking, I think that we on the non-Java side we have build packs that would fall into both categories that you're talking about. So like, for example, Node ships with all the stuff you would need in order to do remote debugging. The only difference is the start command that you would actually execute. And so it would be possible for us to do something like not have to build with the flag or something along that line, but then also like include like a debug process that you could then like start the container with the debug process instead of the regular process and get your start command. The other types of build packs, like Go, for example, doesn't have built-in debugging. We would need a third-party tool like Delve.
Okay.
So I think like what you're describing, logically, I get where all the pieces would fit and like why we might want to have flags for each of them. I just am not sure about the like actual flags we have set. And maybe we just need like a further discussion about like why we need a differentiation of like a launch flag or a launch environment variable versus a build environment variable.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about like our build packs and where that pattern kind of fits. And that's kind of what I was describing is usually where that comes into play. Usually flags are one or the other, and you don't see this like overlapping or near overlapping behavior like with debug here. I think it's really just to give controls into what goes into the image. Versus necessarily whether it's turned on or off at runtime.
Yeah, I guess the question I have is just like, so like for Java, if you gave the Java build packs the BP debug enabled flag, right, it would just still do all the same things it does if you pass this BPL debug enabled flag.
Yeah, so like if you pass the BP debug would be ignored completely. If you pass the BPL debug when you do like a pack build, that would just get ignored as well. The only time it would actually be used for something is when you then go and launch your application.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Maybe we need a little bit more of, a conversation about like the particular examples of like when BPL is used and like what the use cases for those things are. Just because we don't have any, like for us, that isn't really a thing that we have standardized anywhere.
Yeah, I can try to expand on that, add some examples in here that show like what the flags, do. I'll try to keep it a little more not Java specific, just more generic, but yeah, I can do that for sure.
I guess I'm just trying to understand logically. This would help me a little bit, like the actual reason for, so like if I have an environment variable and it's named something like BP debug enabled, and I pass it during build time, like I think it's clear to the build pack that that environment variable is meant to be a build environment variable because of the context in which it's passed. And then the same thing would apply at launch time, right? If I passed BP debug enabled into a container that was running, I think the intent at that point is clear that it is a runtime environment variable because of the context in which it's passed to the container. So I guess I'm like missing out why you need to like be explicit about it. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of context on that because that was something that was a decision made prior to me joining the team. So I'm not totally sure. I do see your point. It is very explicit to make a distinction between the two.
All right. Well, maybe we just start with some more examples and that might
Yeah.
help to clear some stuff up.
Yeah, possibly I could see this being a distinction that's made because I have seen before with users that there's confusion between when to set an environment variable flag. And in the case where we're setting it for both build and runtime, it makes less sense. It makes less difference. They can put it on both. In the case, like we have a lot of flags on the Java side that are launch only. And so if someone's putting that and running pack build and expecting it to do something, they're not going to get a lot of feedback in terms of like that it didn't do what they intended it to do, so to speak.
Okay.
But yep, I'll certainly update this. Any other thoughts or comments, feel free to add them. I can try to address those asynchronously.
I think my only question would be like, it sounds like there's two, maybe potentially a way to break this out into two separate RFCs. One, which is there a way to uniformly across languages call out that like debugging should be enabled? The secondary segment is kind of like, is there a way to better handle folks who want to be more explicit in their management of like image size and or output that they're receiving? And I wonder if, do we need both to be true in order to have something go forward, or is the main concern really just being a little bit more uniform on how to enable debug and size or image, the way that the image is being manipulated is a secondary outcome?
I'm not sure what, like I don't, like a lot of times these tools are not making huge size differences. And so I've never been that big on including ways to turn them off, but it seems like every time we add something and there isn't a way to turn it off, somebody complains. And so that we've kind of just gotten to this pattern of like, anytime we're installing something, there's a way to make it not install that, just to keep those, I guess, image size obsessed, folks happy.
All right. Yeah, so I guess next step is some more examples here that might help. And if other folks have thoughts, feel free to leave them in the discussion. I think that's the end of the RFCs for today. let's see. Next up on the agenda is libcnb v2 updates and questions.
It's a standing item.
I don't know what we do with the standing item. It was added in a time when I was not attending the meeting.
It's hopefully a way for us to continue to make sure that information from like Buildpack author syncs and various sort of Buildpack author tooling ideas are making it into Paketo working group meetings, because I think it's important for us to hear. I will call out that Dan, you opened up an issue around changing the name of the logging library inside of libcnb to something that is more like logger, logs, log, something along those lines, actual sort of more just English for what it is, in an attempt to make it more generally understandable to a wider audience of people. So if y'all have an opinion on what is the best generic name for a logger, please do go and check out that issue and put your 2 cents in, I guess. The only other thing that I'd like to call out is that it is still there are still sets of issues about representing Buildpack authors and Buildpack concepts on the website. On the buildpacks.io website, there's a series of docs issues. I will grab the link to that after this, and just going through and either having opinions on things that should be there, or even more than that, just actually wanting to do issue work is also something to look into.
Yeah, I threw another link in here too. 76, Sam from the Buildpacks group put this together. It's kind of a list of what he sees as, I guess, core requirements or changes for V2. So this is definitely something to take a look at and see if if you have thoughts on other things that might need to go into libcnb to make kind of the ideal V2 version.
Awesome. Next up, should we do office hours? How about language specific working groups?
Yeah, this is also me. I brought this up a while ago, and I just wanted to float the idea again. I know that the Java team has been doing a sort of fortnightly working group meeting since about it would be July, and I just wanted to sort of bring up the fact that is something that we can do and maybe should start looking into, sort of language specific working group ideas. And then office hours, I feel like we are starting to see, I don't know, at least 1 or 2 people a week coming into our general chat and saying, hey, I have a question about this, or hey, I have some question about this, which these are people that have managed to, I guess, find our Slack. It might be nice for there to be another avenue for people to come and basically just ask us general Paketo questions. So having something like an office hours, which is a little bit less structured than this, might be something we'd want to look into. I don't know that we need to come to any decision right now. I guess I wanted to pose this as a, hey, I proposed this like a couple months ago and people were like, it feels a little premature. I'm now doing another check to see if it still feels a little premature, or if maybe I should start poking around and writing up some more official pieces about what these kind of meetings might be.
I can say that we have a Java sub-team working group. We've been doing that for a few months now, and it's primarily attended by VMware folks. But we kind of use it as a chance to run through the sub-team RFCs and talk about what we've been doing recently, and get feedback from anyone that wants to join. We're doing it bi-weekly right now.
I think mostly last time we discussed this, the big issue was the ballooning number of meetings that would mean. When you have this meeting and then Java's like, we're just gonna have one other meeting, that's great. But then we've got Ruby and Python and Node and .NET Core and Go and PHP and web servers. And like, that just seems like a lot of meetings to facilitate and attend. Especially when maintainers are maintainers on not just one, but likely 3 of those teams. I don't know if anyone has thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know that I see like a huge need for having language specific working group meetings. And I also agree that it'd just be maybe way too many meetings, but I would be open to trying an office hours and marketing it a lot and seeing if anybody comes through and just testing it out. And then if we get any participants, then we can like figure out if we want to make it like a regular thing or not.
A trial run does sound good.
If I remember correctly, the previous conversation when this was brought up too mentioned something like potentially having an opportunity for office hours to kind of take a second half of this meeting. Although if I remember right, there was also a concern that that can muddy the waters on when to attend and when not to attend. So maybe the more I think about it now, a separate one could be better for a trial run rather than trying to tack an office hours style group to the end of this working group.
I think my issue with that setup is that like it would kind of suck if you had one specific question and you had to sit through like an entire working group meeting that's not super relevant to you.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, I'd be happy to see someone set up a trial run for something like an office hours, see if we can get any attendees, to find out if it's useful. All right, Forrest, I'm going to expect you to do something about it, considering it was your item.
Cool.
Next up on the list, can we get CFF hosted Zoom rooms?
This is another thing that this is me just trying to pick at some ideas. Currently, obviously, we have a Zoom room that's hosted by, I'm not entirely sure who, but it might make sense for us to try and reach out to someone in the CFF and be like, hey, we are a CFF project that uses Zoom to do working group meetings. It would be nice if you could give us a room that's hosted by you, the organization that we are a part of, instead of some non-neutral third party hoster.
That's fair.
I can also
I think
take,
sure. The big problem here has mostly been the change in CFF leadership.
Mhm.
So the like executive of the foundation left like last month. And in the intervening time, I don't believe the new executive has really started to take over the responsibilities for that. So these type of like administrative and tactical concerns, I have not been able to make any sort of headway on them because there isn't really anyone to go to get stuff like this.
fair enough.
I'd be happy to put you in contact with who I think should be able to help you, maybe.
Sure.
At the very least, I feel like you should be able to go to like the CFF talk, the technical oversight committee, and complain to them, and then have them try to do something about it.
Probably.
All right, anything else last minute on the agenda? Doesn't sound like it. All right, folks. Well, that's everything this week. I'll see you next week.